Are you an athlete looking to play and win in the United States? I'm here today with sports immigration lawyer Steve Maggi, and he'll tell you some of the things you need to know. Steve, what are some of the things that an athlete, for example, should keep in mind before competing in the U.S.?
Well, the most important thing, Dominic, and you'd be amazed how often this issue is ignored, is you need a visa. So there are different kinds of visas that apply depending on how long you will be competing. But the number one rule is you absolutely need a visa to compete. And that could be one event or competition, like an MMA fight or esports, where e-gaming, or a season or a series of seasons. You need a visa to work. You can't come here without one.
So just because you get invited to a U.S. tournament doesn't mean you can actually compete or play here, right, without that visa?
Absolutely. And sometimes people will say, I have an offer to compete in this competition in 3 weeks. And I'll say, well, you need to somehow submit a petition, get it approved, and go get your visa first. Because otherwise you are working without authorization. And that means essentially the way that it's defined is even if you are participating in something where you're not getting compensated in any way, not a bus ticket or a meal or a cup of coffee, if the audience pays to attend the event, then you're required to have a visa, which is sponsored, like you said, by an organization or a team in order to be there. Without the visa, you are working without authorization. What
are some of the things that representatives of athletes and athletes themselves should keep in mind in terms of lead time and common errors that people make when they're securing or failing to secure a visa to participate in a competition in the U.S.?
This is one of those situations where contracts are king. And that's why your firm and ours work together, is because without a binding contract for every single event or competition that you will be participating in, you are not authorized. So you might have a visa, but in order to justify its blanket use, you have to include every binding contract for every day that you're competing, as well as an itinerary for that. If you are playing for a team for a season, then you need a contract with that specific team. And we always recommend, of course, that you have a personal representative also, or an agent, that represents you in that process to make sure that you're getting the right contract, but also making sure that you qualify for the visa, which means you need binding contracts.
So Steve, is an email enough? So say you're a chess player in Britain or in Italy and you get an email invitation to come and compete at a big tournament in the United States. Is that sufficient?
Absolutely not. Because not only do you need a contract that's signed by both parties that has specific contractual terms that you would be an expert in advising on, you also need to be formally passed through an application process. And there are many documents that are required besides a contract. You have to show that you're at an elite level in order to qualify. You have to show that you have international recognition. And if you're a pro athlete, you have to show that you've previously played professionally in whatever country you're from or whatever other countries you've competed in. So it's not for somebody who wants to become a pro athlete, for example. You have to show, so for example, if you're a college athlete and you got a scholarship to study in the US and you're drafted by one of these teams, you have to show that you competed at the highest level on a collegiate level in order to qualify. And you have to have a letter from the sponsoring entity, like let's say Major League Soccer, that says we recognize that this person is internationally recognized as a professional athlete as part of your petition. So there are a lot of moving parts to qualify.
Steve, let's say you're a professional athlete abroad or a representative of a professional athlete who's maybe world-renowned in another country, and that athlete wants to compete in the United States. How much lead time should that athlete or athletic representative have?
I would say you want at least 6 months lead time. So if you're getting a contract last minute, it's going to be very difficult to get that petition submitted and then to be able to get a visa or an embassy appointment in order to be able to go to the US quickly. And there are ways to do it. You can pay what's called premium processing, and that will give you a decision within 15 days. But I would say 6 months is a comfortable period of time, and that's generally the amount of time that you have between seasons. But you do the best that you can, and sometimes we get calls for athletes that have been hired. Essentially, they were trying out, and then we want to keep them here in the U.S. And that all depends if whether you're in a different kind of status when you're trying out, and you can change. But if you're overseas, you need more lag time because there's two parts. There's the immigration process in the United States to get a petition approved, and then the consular process, which is getting the actual visa in your hand. So the more time, the better, because like I said, a lot of documents are required, and you want to make sure that you present a strong case so you don't have any more delays in your processing.
What are some of the consequences of not doing it right? In your experience, in those cases where the athlete's representative or the athlete themselves didn't consult with an experienced immigration attorney far enough in advance?
I've had people come to me saying that they lost their contracts. There was one NBA player that I helped who had their contract revoked because the immigration attorney didn't plan far enough in advance, and they did not have a visa in hand in order to come to the US and work as an authorized employee of that team. And so they had to come and practice, and then they had to leave, and 2 months later they were finally able to play, but they almost lost their entire contract or their ability to play.
So they were delayed playing in the United States by 2 whole months because they didn't prepare the visa in time.
Correct, because they thought that since this person had already played professionally that they didn't have to include all the other elements of the petition that are required.
So the common misconception is, even though you're a world-renowned athlete, even though you might be near the top of your game, you can't just work in the United States or compete in the United States without having a visa. And
absolutely, and it's interesting sometimes to deal with athletes or entertainers that, you know, they're very well known and they think very highly of themselves, of course, and then they say, well, why do I have to jump through these hoops? And that's because what we hope for as attorneys is equal treatment under the law.
Now, what about those people with a high risk tolerance, the athlete or the performer that says, you know what, screw it, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, I've got to be there next week, I'm going to be there and I'll deal with the consequences later. What are some of the consequences of not securing the proper visa to work in the United States?
The problem is social media. Everything is on the internet now. 30 years ago, I would imagine if somebody just wanted to play a gig at the Blue Note and come on over from Paris for a night, they could do it and nobody would be the wiser. But I actually had a case for a German singer who had come as a tourist, and she performed, and it was on, if you Googled it, that performance was forever etched into history. And I told her, when she got a real offer to work for an opera company for 3 years, which was the opportunity of a lifetime to sing for the New York Opera, that if that came up in a search, that she could be denied. And she said, I want to try to submit this. I don't think they're going to find it. And then we had a request for evidence saying, please show us that you were in legal status to perform on this specific night. And it was a show that was, I think, attended by 20 people. But that caused her to not be eligible for that 3-year visa. So the consequences are disastrous. I think it's very important for athletes and entertainers to keep in mind the long term. An opportunity to perform for the first time could be life-changing for them, but if they don't want the expense or to take that chance of potentially not getting caught, they're risking potentially a huge change in their future, because as I learned last year when I did a visa for a jazz quartet from Luxembourg that had one show at 11 a.m. at the Blue Note on a Sunday, we pushed to get those visas and we got them just in time, because as I told the Luxembourg consulate who had hired me for the job, they would potentially not be able to perform ever again in the US if they came in and it became public knowledge through the internet, which it would have been over time.
So message to foreign athletes, entertainers, creative people, and professionals. Do it right. Get the proper visa, because the consequences can be disastrous.
Yeah, and think about long term. It's hard to quantify what an appearance or a competition in the US could do for you, or a performance if you're an artist, right? If you come to the mecca of the world stage of music, for example, or theater, and you do it without authorization, you might not ever have that chance again. And so what's the cost benefit, right? You have to weigh that.
Steve, this has been very informative. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people contact you?
They can go on our website, smalawyers.com, or they can just email me at smaggi@smalawyers.com.
And Steve, if someone has an immediate need, can they also call you?
Absolutely. Our office number is 212-402-6885.
Thanks so much, Steve. We've been speaking with immigration lawyer Steve Maggi of smalawyers.com. very experienced immigration lawyer.
Thank you so much.